All right, welcome. Welcome to the audience both in the summer hall and also online. And it's almost the end of WCF. This is the last breakout session, so thank you so much for sticking around with us. My name is Ke Wang. I work at the Platform for Accelerating the Circular Economy, also known as PACE. And this session is co-organized with the Circular Electronics Partnership. Well, for those of you who were in this room yesterday, there were two sessions who went into quite some details of why minerals and metals are important. We use lots of them in our products every day, and we'll need a lot more to support critical societal transitions, including the clean energy and digitization. And the question is, where are we going to get all those metals and minerals? Part of the answer is in mining, and the other part is in product circularity, increasing efficiency, extending lifetime, and recycling. Well, WCF, being the cathedral of circular economy, I think we all know what those circularity elements are. And I think we also all know why it is important to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Because the more we do that, the fewer new mines we need to open. And therefore, we can alleviate the pressure on environment, social, and geopolitical. So in this session, we don't want to repeat all those why. We think we all understand that. We would like to get into the how. How can we recycle better? How can we recycle more? And I'm Chinese by origin. So in Chinese medicine, there's a method called acupuncture, right? So you apply pressure on a number of specific points. And if you get those points right, it can lead to well-being over the whole body. So for better recycling, we think reverse supply chain is one of those acupuncture points. And what do we mean by that? Right? In a normal supply chain, brings goods from the producers to the consumers. And in a reverse supply chain, it's the opposite. It's bringing used goods from consumers back to the businesses for refurbishment, remanufacturing, and recycling. And there are two steps in it. We first need to collect the goods from the consumers, and then we need to transport them to the business. We're going to look into both today in the session. And we're blessed with 7 excellent speakers in the session, really bringing experiences, insights from different geographies and different sectors. I would like to first invite our keynote speaker from the US federal government, Mr. Rafi Balian. Rafi is the Division Chief of Multilateral Affairs at the Office of Environmental Quality of the US Department of State. And Rafi is going to bring us the perspective from the US government on how a robust global reverse supply chain can ensure critical materials recovery. Rafi.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Kerr, for organizing and leading this important discussion. On behalf of the US State Department, I'm grateful to the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra, for inviting me to participate in the World Circular Economy Forum. Sitra had the foresight of organizing this event 6 years ago. I am honored to be the first US government official to speak in person at the forum. The United States is a strong supporter of circular economy approaches that can decouple continued economic growth and prosperity from natural resource extraction, waste generation, and pollution. We recognize the potential for greater circularity to accelerate economic development, support national security, and advance environmental goals, including the Biden administration's goal to reach a net zero emissions economy by no later than 2050. Through executive orders and recent legislation, the Biden administration seeks to diversify and secure supply chains for critical minerals, including from electronic waste, in an environmentally sound manner that promotes worker safety and environmental, social, and governance ESG standards. The United States recognizes that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to circularity. Circular economy is not a specific destination, but a diverse set of approaches and activities that can be applied to industries, sectors, resources, and at different scales, companies, communities, and countries. The private sector plays, and should be encouraged to play, a leading role in developing and scaling innovative circular solutions. At a fundamental level, we take a relatively decentralized approach to circularity, where more bottom-up efforts, including by cities, counties, and state governments that sit largely outside of federal regulation, as well as by the private sector, play significant roles in advancing circularity. Even with our decentralized approach, however, there are over 50 national-scale federal government programs that help advance the objectives of circularity. And while the federal government has not rebranded all of these under the rubric or name of circularity, many of these efforts are long-standing. These programs encourage circularity and resource efficiency, including through research and development, sustainable public procurement, consumer education, sustainable materials and systems, sound chemical management, and clean energy. For example, the Environmental Protection Agency has long led on sustainable materials management and is now developing a series of national strategies under the title Circular Economy for All, which has begun with a national recycling strategy that has a goal of raising our current rate of 15% recycling of generated e-waste to 50% by 2030, and includes a strategy to curb plastic pollution. The Department of Energy and our national laboratories are long-standing global leaders in material science and innovation, and lead the way for the United States to develop ecosystem models that enhance circularity for the clean energy transition. Argonne, Oak Ridge, and the National Renewable Energy Laboratories are working with private sector and other partners, including the European Battery Alliance, to establish robust and sustainable supply chains for lithium-ion batteries, including collecting and recycling critical minerals for reuse, and second-use scale-up demonstrations that integrate end-of-life EV batteries into secondary applications. In June 2022, the Department of State launched the Mineral Security Partnership to help diversify the supply chain of critical minerals needed for the clean energy transition. Two of the 4 pillars of the partnership focus on incorporating ESG standards into MSP projects and promoting recycling. We're also working closely with our G7 partners under the Japanese presidency to identify ways to pursue efficiency and circularity along supply chains. The imperative to work together is significant. Over 82% of global electronic waste in 2020 was not documented, leaving approximately $47 billion in potential minerals and materials untapped and at risk of environmentally unsound disposal. Efficient recycling of advanced batteries and solar panels, for example, can help diversify supply chains for energy transition minerals and prevent toxic materials from entering landfills. While the technology for recycling of minerals and metals is making important advances to scale towards commercial deployment, we are challenged in the United States and many parts of the world with low collection rates and outdated waste management systems built on a linear model. The Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law in the United States provide resources for cities and states to work with stakeholders to improve solid waste management and increase recycling, including critical minerals from e-waste in an environmentally, socially, and economically sound manner. These efforts are also in line with the Biden administration's commitments to environmental justice in our cities and states, so that underserved and underrepresented populations, including from indigenous communities, are included in circular solutions. Circularity is enhanced when we have transparent and accurate data, provide access to information broadly, ensure ability and opportunity for public participation in decision-making, and integrate economic opportunities also for frontline communities. The work to extend lifespans through reuse and repair, and by tracking flows of electronics and e-waste through extended producer responsibility models, can also help transition the informal components of many collection schemes for waste or used goods into a more formal aspect of the economy using circular approaches. Across the United States, we see a groundswell of circular approaches in cities and states, including a move toward zero waste in the city of Austin, Texas, and circular economy legislation in the state of California. Some states are also looking at extended producer responsibility for many different types of products and materials. For the full benefits of a more circular economy to be realized, we need to make systems-level interventions across multiple industries in value chains, both domestically and internationally, and on timelines commensurate with the global challenges at hand, including addressing climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. The scale of the challenge and opportunity requires an all-of-society and all-of-government approach. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you so much, Rafi. The world has eyes on the US, so it's great to hear all the domestic and international collaboration efforts happening in the US. So I already said we'll have two panels today, one on collection and the second on transport. So I'd like to invite our two speakers in the first panel onto the stage. So we have Mr. Alexander Battiger, and he's an advisor of Climate Change, Environment and Infrastructure Division, Global Advisory Project Go Circular at the German Society for International Cooperation, or maybe better known as the GIZ. And our second speaker is Ms. Tuli Milima. I practiced, but I might have got it wrong still, Tuli. Tuli is a leading expert and a group manager at the Finnish Environment Institute. So, the name of this panel is Setting Up Effective Collection System, which is notoriously difficult, especially for consumer electronics. We heard from Rafi before that the UN e-waste monitor report told us back in 2019, the world has generated 53 million tons of e-waste, among which only 17% was formally collected and recycled globally. So, and the number varies a lot across different geographies, right? So we have Alexander, who worked a lot in Africa, and we have Tuli, who works a lot in Finland. So lovely to hear from both of you how the situation is in different geographies. Maybe I'll start with you, Tuli. Could you please share a little bit how is post-consumer electronics collection doing in Finland? Where are the biggest challenges, in your opinion?
Yes, I'm delighted to tell you about the collection in Finland. So in Finland, the e-waste collection is organized so that the producer responsibility organizations are in charge of organizing the waste management, and it's free of charge for customers to deliver those devices to the collection. And these collection points are in medium-sized shops, and which are also selling those new devices, and then we can deliver those old devices to regional collection points. And in these regional collection points, producer responsibility organizations are doing collaboration with the municipalities, because these regional collection points are are owned by the municipalities, and in several of those collection points it's possible to also deliver those appliances and devices to those collection points. And then you asked about the challenges, and I think the main challenge is how to make the collection of those devices so easy that we always deliver those devices to those collection points. And the amount of those machines is growing, and at the moment we know that there is a part of the mixed waste is including some electronic devices. In Finland, in the Helsinki metropolitan area, there is nearly 1% of electronic devices in the mixed waste. So how can we make people deliver those devices to the collection? And then we have special challenge in Finland. As you know, Finland is a very big country. We have long distances and we have sparsely populated areas. So how can we make the services so good that even in the small village is a good way and possibilities to deliver those devices into the collection?
Right. So if I hear you right, Tuuli, you mentioned two challenges. One is about separate collection. So in a city area like Helsinki, it's really about getting it perfect, right? You mentioned there's still 1% that's get mixed with municipality waste, and the rest is collected. So we're trying to get that last percent also separated. While in the rural areas, the challenge is when you have such a large space, sparsely distributed population, how to do collection in an effective way. Thank you. Now, Alexander, moving to you, because you spend a lot of time working in different African countries, and we know that Africa as a continent overall, the collection rate is quite low. So, why is it so? Why is the formal collection rate so low in Africa, and where are the biggest challenges as you see?
Okay, so first and foremost, I would say we have to define what is being collected there and what is being reported, and what services are provided on the ground. And maybe the collection rates are not as low as we think, and there might be actually something to be learned from there. And in the beginning, I would like to say why I'm speaking about e-waste collection in Africa. It requires a justification. So I've been seconded to Ghana, where GIZ advises or jointly cooperates with the government of Ghana an e-waste program. We have been advising a couple of governments on e-waste policies. We have been cooperating with the East African Communication Organization on developing e-waste strategies. We have did a lot of trainings as well with government representatives, SMEs and NGOs and consultants. And last but not least, we happen to host a rather large multi-actor partnerships, the Prevent Waste Alliance, where we have a large network of e-waste recyclers in African countries. And talking about collection in Africa, I will give a very good example how things work and what the circularity opportunities are over there and what the challenge resulting from that is. And I will use a very concrete example of a refrigerator that was broken in a colleague's house, and you can apply that to any item over there. So it was broken there, and as he was working the same project as I was, we said, okay, let's follow the pathway of the refrigerator. So he brought it out of the house and discussed with the guard, okay, let's see what happens. Within less than 1 hour, it was collected. So that's an incredible service of collection. So they do not expect you to bring it somewhere. It's informal actors just collect it from your household. But what will happen to the item? So the guard, most certainly, he received a compensation from the collector. So it's not waste. The collector will try to sell it to a repair shop. So there will be a cycle of repair and refurbishment and component harvesting. And once it's beyond repair, it will enter an informal material recovery facility. And we're all well aware about the externalization of environmental and social costs of treating e-waste in the informal sector. And that's the challenge. So we really have to combine the strength of very efficient collection schemes, very efficient repair, reuse, and refurbishment schemes with environmentally sound management of e-waste and of life. And this is the challenge, because you need a long-term working financing mechanism for that one, because there is no level playing field for doing it in a sustainable way.
Interesting. So what I understood, Alexander, that although the official number of formal collection rates looks quite low in Africa, but actually in real life, the collection is very efficient. It is very efficiently done by the informal sector. And the real challenge is how to get those informally collected e-waste into formal or high standard recycling or refurbishment repair facilities. Right. Okay, I'll come back to you later on that one. But after 2 days, I don't know about you, I feel a bit tired talking about challenges, right? We need to move beyond talking about challenges, obstacles, what's difficult, and look into what is possible, where are the opportunities, and where are the solutions. So I'd like to ask both of you to talk about that, solutions. If I may still start with you, Tuli. Tell us a bit what's going on in Finland. What is the Finnish public sector doing to increase collection of post-consumer electronics that last 1%, a few percent in Helsinki, in cities, but also, how to overcome the challenge of rural area collection? And in your opinion, what do you think? Where do you think more can be done?
Yes, so some of those good examples I could share. One is that cooperation between the municipalities and producer responsibility organizations, because together they can increase the service level of the people and wider collection. And when one specific example on how to reach those sparsely populated areas is that municipalities they have created they are kind of vehicles that they have specific routes, and they are collecting those devices as well as other hazardous waste from those rural areas. So then you don't have to take those machines, if they are broken, a long distance, because the vehicle is mobile and collecting them near where you are living, so reaching those little villages too. But then another good example is that, as Alexander mentioned, the refurbishment and the kind of lengthening the lifespan of the devices, it's very important, and that's one of those big challenges too. But in Finland, municipalities they have established, especially in larger cities, reuse centers, and there you can donate your old products and old machines if you don't use them anymore, and then they can be sold again and with lower prices than in typical new products in shops. So that's a very good way of lengthening the lifetime of machines. And also the challenge is to make the system providing repairment and maintenance for those machines, and those reuse centers, some of those are providing also these services, and after those repairments then they are selling them. So these are some good examples I would mention. And then you were asking what should be done more. So I think we could do so much more. We could sort more efficiently. We could repair, and we could donate if we don't need. We could do that more efficiently. But for producer responsibility organizations, I would say that listen to your customers. If people are needing more of those collection points, please do a little bit more of those collection points, and in places where people are moving to municipalities, I would say that if you are not having that reuse center in your municipality, you could start one and start operation. For companies and investors, I would say that develop new digital machines and technologies so that we are not that independent on those critical materials. So use less harmful and less critical materials so that they are not hazardous and they are not so critical. So it's a better way to make it sustainable throughout the whole chain. So for example, in plastics, there is the problem because we have to prevent them from burning by using fire retardants, but they are hazardous. By switching new substances, it might be able to circulate those plastics better. But that reuse and less hazardous, and let's make everything more better and sort, and let's think what we are doing with our products if we are using them so that they will be available as long time as possible.
Right, start from upstream. And Finland must be doing something right in collecting for reuse, especially because we think that over the past 2 days, we heard quite a few good examples of Finnish business looking at refurbish, repair, and giving a second life to electronic devices. And indeed, for the rural areas, I guess we'll need kind of a garbage collection service anyway, right? So yeah, maybe they can just add a bin in the truck for US collection. Thank you so much, Tuli. And back to you, Alexander. I think you already kind of made a segue to my second question to you, right? We talk about informal workers' role in efficient collection in Africa, but how can they be better recognized and better integrated? And as you said, the challenge, how can we make sure more informally collected, but very efficiently collected e-waste can end up not in the backyard being burned, but end up in facilities with high environmental and social standards?
Okay, that's a tough one. If we would really know, we would do or try to implement. But I firmly believe we have to first define basically the system we want to integrate people into, and this has to be very, very clear, and then we have to figure out whether that is an informal system or not. So the bad news is that there is no level playing field for let's doing it environmentally sound, because some of the informal processes, especially polluting ones, are economically highly efficient. So if you are a formal recycler in a country, and basically in every country you will find 1 or 2 companies who either want or actually do environmentally sound management of e-waste, but they're faced with competition by actors, be it informal or formal, that can and do externalize environmental and social costs. So we have to create a framework for them that they can actually run their businesses in an environmentally sound way while earning money. And that's the difficult task. So we really have to define what is the level playing field for competition, for a sustainable circular economy in Africa. And we don't fully know it yet, but this should not stop us from doing something. So long term, the perspective, most likely a financing mechanism like EPR that allows for an internalization of environmental costs will provide the solutions we are all waiting for. But looking at what can be done short term, because EPR will take some time in implementation, and we have to do something, and we have to learn from something the lessons for the implementation of EPR. So short-term piloting is very much needed. In Ghana, for example, we implemented an incentive scheme with informal collectors where they could hand over cables to a formal collection point, and the collected cables will then be handed over to a formal recycler. So you can apply incentives at a site or for the service of collection, and you can hand over then the material to a recycler that is applying environmentally sound management methodologies. Another example of work where we have been, let's say, cooperating on in the Prevent Waste Alliance was the Econ pilot in Nigeria, where the concept of e-waste compensations or financing mechanism for sustainability was combined with sustainable treatment pathways for monitors and lithium-ion batteries. And we were able to collect more than 30 tons of monitors and batteries. I know it's a very low number, but at least we have proven that it's doable in Nigeria to treat those materials appropriately while being based on an informal supply chain. And the big question then is, if we cooperate with them based on standards, is it still informal or not? I think it's not a relevant question, but we should maintain the labor-intensive part of it while defining the ways of cooperation with them. And there's another very good example for that in Ghana. It's like the Ghana Technical Guidelines. They have different levels of economic operation in the e-waste value chain. And if you want to register as a collector, it's really basically your ID, a phone number, and a collection point where you want to drop off your e-waste. This is something doable. And you can as well register with an association, and then you're kind of formalized already. And if you want to do permitted dismantling, there are as well doable processes. So we should really focus short-term about what is doable, while recognizing the services they provide to the society. And it has been piloted, it has been done, and that's a doable approach, and this is something we should do while we implement the long-term financing mechanisms.
Yeah, that's lovely, it's doable. So keeping the long-term solutions, EPR, for example, in the site, but also focus on short-term actionable solutions. And there are examples in Ghana and Nigeria showing that it is possible, right? It needs to be replicated, it needs to be scaled. Thank you so much, Alexander and Thule. Thank you very much. I'd like to escort you back to your seats and invite our next panel of speakers. So our second panel is about transboundary movement. I'll explain in a second what that means. And we have 4 speakers for the second panel. I'd like to invite Mr. Jonas Draeger, Senior Manager of Strategic Engagement and Country Compliance at the Environmental Initiatives EMEA at Apple. How many of you have an iPhone? And I'd like to invite Ms. Julianne Adams. Julianne is the CEO of the European Electronics Recyclers Association, EERA. I'd like to invite Ms. Tatiana Terekova. Tatiana is a program officer of the Secretariat of the Basel Convention. And last but not least, Ms. Robin van Doren, the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, or maybe better known as the RVO, of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy of the Netherlands. So, the name of the panel, transboundary movement. What does that mean, right? It sounds like a really technical, difficult term. It actually just means moving stuff, in this case, e-waste or end-of-life electronics products, across country borders, from one country to the other. And, well, we talked about high-standard e-waste recycling facilities, and not every country would have such facilities. And to be honest, not every country needs one, because recycling needs economy of scale, right? To be a viable business, it needs volume. Therefore, to achieve better recycling, more recycling, it is necessary to move e-waste across country borders, from countries without high-standard recycling facility to countries with high-standard recycling facility. And we also want to make sure that the e-waste flow is not going the wrong direction, right? Not into countries without proper facility to manage them. That's why we need strong regulation like the Basel Convention to ensure that. But sometimes the unintended consequence is that strong regulation also makes waste flow in the right direction more difficult. The permitting process takes sometimes months or even years. It's expensive, it's inflexible. So as a result, our reverse supply chain is not as efficient, far less efficient compared to the forward supply chain. And as a consequence of that, secondary materials are less market competitive compared to primary materials. So we don't want either or. We want both and. We want transboundary movement for proper recycling and recovery to be both efficient and responsible. And the question is, how can we do that? And that's what we're discussing today. So maybe if I may start with you, Tatiana. The Basel Convention has just had its COP, the conference for the parties, at the beginning of the month, beginning of May in Switzerland. So Tatiana, could you maybe give us a few headlines? What was high on the agenda of the Basel COP this time? And what might be most relevant for what we're talking about today, circularity in electronics?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and it's really a pleasure to be part of this dialogue. So indeed, we had 2 weeks of very intense and also exciting discussions, and there are several matters which are very much relevant to the circularity in electronics. So the COP16 to the Basel Convention, and here I would like to mention that Basel Convention is a legally binding global treaty. It's nearly universal, almost, it has 190 parties, and it seeks to promote global actions to ensure environmentally sound management of waste, controlling transboundary movements or trade in a different terminology, and also minimization of generation of hazardous and other waste. So, what happened at the COP16? One issue I would like to talk about here briefly is that the COP16, the parties were addressing the implications of the e-waste amendments. So e-waste amendments, these amendments which were adopted last year in 2022, and they change the trade control regime for transboundary of e-waste. So they will be applicable in 2025, so in 2 years. And currently, what we have on the table is that e-waste can be traded as hazardous waste, and for that you would need to apply the PIC procedure, the prior informed consent procedure, meaning that the shipment cannot take place before all the states concerned provide the consent, including the state of transit. Or it could be also traded as a non-hazardous waste. And of course, here you have some legal unclarity. And what these e-waste amendments seek to do is to improve this, or to provide the legal clarity. And now, all e-waste from 2025 will be subject to the PIC procedure, meaning that whether it's hazardous or non-hazardous, they will be subject to this consent. And there were some clarification about what actually e-waste, and here we're talking about e-waste as a whole equipment, then components of e-waste, but as well as e-waste from the processing, some fractions. So this is what this amendment clarified. And also the entry which was related to the e-waste as non-hazardous was abolished, and it was replaced with the entry which was moved to the annex where we have all the other waste, meaning that the waste that are not necessarily hazardous, but they need special considerations because they are not, if they are not managed in the proper way, they will cause adverse effect to health and environment. So that was the issue related to the hazardous, non-hazardous when it comes to the transboundary movements. Now, linked to that, we have another, let's say, concern with transboundary movement when it comes to the e-waste is classification or determination whether it's a e-waste or used equipment. And that issue also very important, and that is addressed by another process. In 2015, parties adopted the technical guidelines to distinguish, which provide guidance to distinguish between e-waste and equipment. And there it lists the situations where equipment would be considered as waste, and also it lists the situation when the equipment would be considered as used equipment, and for that you don't need to apply the peak procedure. And here we're talking about equipment destined for the direct use, for the extended use by the original owner for the original purpose, and also for the failure analysis and refurbishment. And so here you notice that we are talking about various different disposal operations or non-disposal operations. And that part, the disposal operation, is very important for the Basel Convention because it helps also to define what is waste and what is not waste. And now we have another process where parties are reviewing and revising these disposal operations. So hopefully by 2025 there will be proposals, and that also might change further the trade control regime for the transboundary movements of all waste, and including the e-waste. And perhaps just one little point that also I would like to mention, and here I think we're coming from the different sectors and different part of the world. And another point or another matter which was considered at the COP was PACE. We have another PACE in the Basel Convention.
Popular name, yeah.
I think it was original PACE, but now it's called PACE 2.
We liked it, so we took
it. So it's a partnership for action on challenges on e-waste. So this is a partnership comprised of parties, private sector, companies, NGOs, and everyone who's interested. And there was also some confirmation of the work plan and things like that. So there is this partnership, and where parties and various stakeholders can, on the equal basis, to discuss the issues related to e-waste.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tatiana. If I understand correctly, the Basel Convention, the regulation is getting tougher on one side, right? All e-waste is now considered, well, hazardous or not, will require the PIC process. And it's also there's more granularity in it, looking at the definition of e-waste and the intended management route. And if I may move on to Julian. Julian, you have been in the field of electronics recycling for 20 years, more than 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. So what do you think of this latest update in the Basel Convention? How would that affect moving e-waste between EU countries or in and out of EU?
Yeah, I think if you can show the slide, they can show the next slide. It's lots of photos, perfect. So this really kind of explains what Tatiana was saying. And as Tatiana said, this was initiated last year. And there's still a huge amount of a gap of information by the practitioners, the people who are moving this type of equipment. And the vast sort of misunderstanding is that it was only related to whole e-products, so whole washing machines, whole hair dryers and everything else. But as you can see from the photos, it's also the fractions. So these are appliances that have gone to e-waste recyclers. They have been dismantled either manually or mechanically, and you end up with all of those fractions. So for clarity, it's fractions that are still technically mixed. So they're not a pure copper, they're not a pure steel, they're not you can see in the photos they've all got little bits of plastic, little bits of wood, other non-primary material that would be focused for recovery. So personally, and this is a personal view, I think it might be utter chaos this time next year, because I've done a survey of our members, and our members cover the continent of Europe. So UK and Switzerland, as well as the European Union and Turkey and Serbia. And on average, they tell me that they expect to have an additional 3 new full applications for every facility that they export from. So this would be where they have previously sent them via green list. So they've just filled in the Annex 7 form and the shipment goes off to the end's destination. So especially things like printed circuit boards, fridge compressors are big examples that are moved by most European Union countries under green list. So in 2019, July, the European Commission initiated a range of reports and research and on quality standards of treatment. And they estimated there were over 5,000 e-waste recycling facilities in Europe. So let's assume they don't all export, because not everybody does. Assume 25%. Times 3, that's nearly 4,000 applications are going to hit the European Commission, the European Union's competent authorities, and they're going to have to start in June next year. Because these applications can take, 12 weeks, 6 months, 12 months, So if they want to be ready for January 2025, I'm advising our members, start doing the paperwork and get it ready to go in June. So the competent authorities, a lot of them that I've spoken to, have no idea this is going to hit them in such a big wave. And a lot of them only have one person or one part-time person. And so, in smaller countries, they might have one person who does a whole host of other environmental things in the department. And then once a month, they have one day to use all of the applications. So that's clearly going to create a backlog. And on top of that, we need to consider that there are also all of the applications for imports into the European Union, which is probably the same number. So, that's going to cause, again, a huge impact and delay. You said at the beginning, actually, that it's about moving e-waste or fractions from a country that has no facilities to a country that does have facilities. Actually, it's all to do with global trade. And so even within the European Union, there are competitors, and they might offer more money, they might want a different grade, they might want a different quality, they might be able to cope with smaller volumes, big volumes. So it's not just countries that have no processing. It's actually to do with global trade. And secondary raw materials should be the new primary raw materials, because then we can stop the mining until we run out of secondary materials. And so that should be the focus. So it's going to have a huge impact. The other thing that's perhaps, again, not so well known or understood is that the new codes will actually also ban the movement of hazardous e-waste from OECD countries to non-OECD countries. So that would include Pakistan, India, Malaysia, Serbia, China, obviously, but all the countries where a lot of this fractions actually traditionally goes. Fridge compressors, most of Europe's fridge compressors will go to Pakistan, and that will stop. The reason being that, as you can see from the picture of the fridge compressor there in the middle next to the copper, it has plastic in it, and that plastic could be have brominated flame retardants, be a POPs, so therefore is now hazardous. So that would have to go for a full application and not go to Pakistan. So they're going to have routes as to different routes. On a plus side, because you have to have a positive, I've been doing applications for clients for 15, 20 years. And it will actually establish longer trade contracts and trade relationships. Because if an operator has gone to the bother of applying for a PICS application, they've set up a financial guarantee, they have negotiated the routes, they've gone through all the pain of all the questions you get from all the competent authorities, they're not suddenly going to move to a new operator, a new buyer who might say, I'll give you €10 a tonne more, because they'd have to go through all of that process again. So that will really establish good trade routes. It will take about 3 years, probably a bit longer. But that's a real positive, and certainly as an association, we're very supportive, because we want to see the ban of this material going to countries that have no environmentally sound process, and hopefully it'll be more identifiable.
Yeah. Thank you, Julianne. And actually, hearing you speaking, I'm realizing to ship something from country A to country B, there might be more than 2 countries involved in the process, right? If we need to ship something from Portugal to Finland, there are many countries in between. So do all those countries, the transit countries, all need that approval, the PIC process? And how do people even manage that?
With difficulty. It really depends on the method of how it's transported. And of course, when Basel was first initiated 30 odd years ago, shipping routes were very different. Very small ships. They had, a movement from port A to port B. Everything got unloaded. Then from port B, it was put onto another ship, and that doesn't happen now. So shipping methods have changed. So you have very large containers, and sometimes that waste or that material doesn't come off the ship. It sits in the port while something else is unloaded, and then that same ship then goes on somewhere else. So if you take the Portugal to Finland scenario, so it would go from possibly go from Portugal to Rotterdam, and it will sit on the boat. It won't be offloaded. So Rotterdam will be a transit country. It will then go from Rotterdam through the canal in Denmark. So Denmark will be a transit country. And then from Denmark, it will then go to the port in Finland. That's one possible route. If you went by road or rail, you've got numerous more on top of that as well, which would add all to the complications.
Oh.
And what ERA have been advocating very strongly for is that transit countries should, where the waste is not put on the ground, so it's not unloaded, a transit country should have it should be an immediate tacit approval. They shouldn't be able to deny it or hold it up. And I've got many examples of transit countries where they have literally held it up for over 18 months. So there's one of our members is trying to move waste from South America, and it has to go through the Bahamas on this particular ship, and there's nobody in the Bahamas office. I have volunteered to go out, but funny. But it means that application can't be approved for 12, 18 months, which is ridiculous when it's not actually a risk to that country. So especially for pre-consented facilities, so facilities have gone through an extra layer of we're environmentally sound, we've provided all the extra information to our competent authority, they've said we're pre-consented. So that should be immediate. There should be no transit countries between A and B, because that's about, improving the environmental sound management and improving the logistics and improving the circular economy. Where other transit countries are in, unless, and this is, ERA's viewpoint, that where there is an environmental risk, then yes, that transit country could perhaps have, an input. But if there's no evidence of an environmental risk, as in it's not unloaded, they basically shouldn't have, a decision. So it's very difficult to discuss this without all of this knowledge, because, like I say, next year it's going to hit big time. And if all of those transit countries are also inundated with the 4,000 plus new applications, that's really going to slow the whole economy up and the whole circular economy in general.
Yeah, thank you, Julianne, for sharing all the headaches in real life. Maybe if I come back to Tatiana quickly. So we heard from Julianne, the new amendment will probably mean more workload for the competent authority, will probably mean slower approval process. Is this on the radar of the Basel Convention, and what is being done to maybe improve and speed up the PIC process?
Yeah, thank you. Indeed, this is a really important point, an important issue, and the PIC procedure is the cornerstone of the trade control regime of the Basel Convention. And it was done for purpose, right, to protect vulnerable countries from unwanted waste. Now, and also what is important to know that if the PIC procedure is not being followed, that would constitute illegal traffic under the convention, and the Basel Convention requires that parties take measures to consider it a criminal offense. So that's quite serious, as you can understand. Now, challenges regarding the procedure, as any global procedure, of course, there are challenges, and we heard from parties, from observers, from various stakeholders about these challenges. At the last COP last year, it was formally taken up, and the Secretariat prepared compilation of views about challenges and possible ideas and initiative for improvement on the big procedure. And there are some interesting ideas in this compilation. For example, you're talking about transit country, whether the use of the tacit agreement, meaning that you don't have to every time say yes if you allow a transit from your country, but you say, okay, I want to say yes for all the transit. And so that will apply. So that could be one idea. Then we need to maybe understand better the reasons for non-responses from parties. Is it only the technical problems, or is it policy issues? Or, of course, country context is also a huge issue, just it's a simply logistical problem, but it exists. There could be also the, as I think, as you mentioned, the issue whether there could be peak for waste to the pre-consented facilities, like what is done in OECD. So there are many different issues were brought up. Now, that was just opinions of countries, of parties and others. Now, at this CAP, parties establish a group, working group, to take it further, and it's actually open not only to parties but also to observers, so all interested observers, of course, please do participate. And then at the next CAP, hopefully there will be some further progress, recommendations how to take it, how to improve it. Now, on the technical side, there is another process which links to the digitalizing the procedure, and that is also very important. And the work already started, but again, you can imagine that it's not a short-term work. It's really a long-term, because we're talking about 190 parties, and there have to be system which is flexible enough to be applicable to all. And that could also perhaps give some solutions to the improving the peak procedure.
Great, Tatiana, great to hear that the Bali Convention parties are working on improving efficiency on the both end, both efficient and responsible. Thank you both. Now, I'd like to hear more from the private sector. Jonas, well, Apple, we all know Apple as a big brand name. Apple obviously has a big role to play in the forward supply chain. But why is Apple concerned about the topic of transboundary movement at the end of life?
Right. We think it's of paramount importance, actually. And I'm really glad to be here, and thanks for the invite. In order to explain that, I have to set it in a broader context. And Franz Timmermans, the Vice President of the European Commission yesterday, was talking about the necessity to decouple, right? Decouple our growth from carbon emissions. We at Apple, we've said we want to do exactly that. We have a target for by 2030 to go carbon neutral. We are already well on our way. Since 2015, we've achieved the decoupling. We've actually grown by 68% since then, while reducing our carbon emissions by 45%. Now, a significant factor in achieving that sort of decoupling is circular economy. And what we're talking about here today is a change to how circular economy logistics is going to work. And it's significant. Now, we at Apple, we want to be able to one day use only recycled or renewable materials in all of our products. We're well on our way, but we're not yet there by far. We are about 20% of our materials that we currently commit to our products, that ship in our products, are recycled. For some of our materials, we're further ahead. The way we are thinking about this is, and I was smiling when I saw your slide because ours is not so dissimilar, but it's kind of a step further in the process, right? So what you see in the back here is what Apple has determined to be our priority materials. A lot of them come from this streams
the next step.
Yes, that you've just shown. And these are 14 materials. They represent about 87% of the mass of materials that we commit to our products. So if only we could close the loop on 14 materials, we'd be nearly 90% on the way to shipping entirely recycled content circular products, right? Now, for some of the materials, it's easier than for others, but all of them need recycling. And so I want to dive a bit into that. Before I do that, I'll give a few examples on the progress. So for instance, aluminium, we're known for using aluminium in our products. Our enclosures for a lot of our products use aluminium. 67% of the aluminium that we commit to our products is recycled right now. A lot of products already are at 100%. I, for instance, use a MacBook that we've launched in 2018 with 100% recycled aluminum enclosure. The Taptic engine, that's the little thing that makes your phone vibrate, uses 95% of recycled tungsten across all of our products. We have rare earth that we have introduced in our products. We've been the first manufacturer that brought recycled rare earth into the smartphones. We're now at a 73% across the board, up from 45 last year. So we're making massive progress. And then for cobalt is obviously very important for batteries. We had 25% recycled content. Just this year, we've said we want to be very concrete. We also want suppliers to know where we're heading on a number of target materials where we've said we can make very aggressive targets. By 2025, we're going to ship 100% recycled cobalt in all Apple-designed batteries. We're going to have 100% recycled rare earth in our products. And the gold plating and the tin soldering in our products for the Apple-designed printed circuit boards are also going to be 100% recycled content. Now, you will recognize where that is coming from, right? And it's coming from the slide that we've just seen. And so we cannot achieve those rates without partnering with best-in-class recyclers. And we cannot achieve those rates without scale. And as Marianne was saying already, that happens in select facilities in a global supply chain. Circular economy is built on a global supply chain, has to be built on a global supply chain in order to achieve the efficiencies that we need. And so what we're really trying to do here, and that's why it's so important, is how can we get to a place where circular supply chains are on a level playing field with linear extractive supply chains. And that's why the logistics is so important, right? So talking about the Basel Convention, we've been following the process for a good while. And we are very committed to the Basel Convention. In fact, we've gone public in encouraging our home country, the US, one of the few countries that is yet to ratify the Basel Convention, to do exactly that. We're thinking a lot about the opportunities that the Basel Convention offers to safeguard against all of the negative externalities that we do need to prevent. And at the same time creating those supply chains that, essentially what we're doing is we are node by node, every single supply node that we have, and you can imagine it's quite complex at Apple, we're rebuilding them into circular ones. And so we think in order to do that, we need to have free movement for materials that are pursuing circularity. What we're thinking about is a concept that we call resource recovery lane. In the session earlier this morning, it was called a trusted trader concept. You've talked about pre-approved facilities. I think a lot of those concepts are not so dissimilar. But at the core, what we think what this has to entail is that countries have to have the agency to opt in to expedite those materials and establish and kind of say, I want to be part of a circular supply chain. I think this is an economic opportunity for my country. Right, and there's more actors. Hopefully, I mean that's what WCEF is hopefully trying to show. There's more actors that are committing to the circular economy. In other words, there's going to be more actors trying to build up those circular supply chains. In other words, there needs to be more countries that are saying, I'm opting in. I want part of that. Right, I want to build the circular economy on a global scale together with those partners. Now, that has to happen in a traceable way. It has to happen in a socially responsible way. It has to include pre-approved facilities so that we make sure we have sound and environmental practices. But we think that is possible. We think that could also be done within the Basel Convention. It's currently not done in the Basel Convention to the extent that we think it should be, but we think it's possible. And so really, I think what this comes down to is creating better framework conditions for a circular supply chain. And we really have to get better at that to be able to make that shift, right, from virgin to recycled content. So yeah, I'll leave that here.
Yeah.
Maybe that helps kind of set the context of why we think it's important and why we're engaging.
Right. Because you have quite ambitious targets when it comes to recycled content input. And Apple is a high-tech company, so maybe I would also like to ask you a bit the role of technology,
Yes.
right? So you talked about best-in-class recycling facilities. So there are facilities with different technologies. Some are more advanced than the others. Could you maybe explain a bit more? What is the role of technology in better recycling, and how do maybe more advanced technologies play a role in
Yes.
increasing recycling rates?
Yeah, in many different ways, but I think I want to highlight two. One is if you look at how it's currently done. If you take an iPhone, it's not a lot of centimeters long, and what a shredder does is a highly efficient recycling technology. It shreds an iPhone into smaller pieces, a few centimeters. A shredder is a very effective technology to take apart larger pieces of electronics. When it comes to small pieces of electronics, consumer electronics, these pieces are too big, and they're still containing a lot of the target materials that you would want, right? And so if I take an example, rare earth, for instance, you would find them on components that are being sent for copper recycling. The copper will be recovered, the rare earth will be lost, or we want those rare earth, right? And only then can we move and pivot from mining to recycling if we get to that level of purity. At its core, recycling for us is a play for purity. Right? How do you get to that purity? And advanced recycling technologies can help. So I want to give a few examples.
If you can be brief or some
Yes,
examples,
I'll be brief.
I want to make sure that Robin gets enough time as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. So just to say, we've developed DAISY, which is a recycling technology. What it does is if you take 1 metric ton of components that we send that comes out of DAISY, that equals about 2,000 tons of mined earth in terms of what you can get from it, right? And so from that perspective, if only we could get more of that stuff consolidated, sent to specialty recyclers, then we would have the ability to recover much more at a higher level of purity. We can only do that with really efficient movement, and that's where the waste regulations come in.
Yeah. Very clear. Thank you, Jonas. Now coming to Robin. Well, Jonas, you mentioned in the morning session, the trade session this morning, speakers talked about the trusted traders scheme. I think one is improving the pick process, more efficient, and the trusted trader system, either bilateral or multilateral, are the two main avenues I see in solution space for a both efficient and responsible transboundary movement. And I think, talking about actions, doing, right? A prime example is the North Sea Resources Roundabout project. And Robin, you were the project lead of the North Sea Resources Roundabout project. Could you maybe briefly explain to our audience what that project was about? How was it set up?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for inviting me to speak a little bit about my experience as a project lead, as you said, for the North Sea Resources Roundabout. That's for me a little bit digging into the past because the project's no longer live. But I'm eager to do so because I think some of the work that we do is very concrete and relevant still. So it would be really nice, I think, if we could build future initiatives based on that experience. So the North Sea Resources Roundabout was the first international Green Deal, and it aimed to create green growth in the North Sea area by facilitating sustainable trade and transportation of secondary resources. And the reason for starting that was our understanding. I mean, we've heard it here again, so I'm not sure how much progress has been made since then. Our understanding that real and serious barriers to the circular economy exist because of differences in the national interpretation of EU legislation on waste, on REACH. So there, in essence, I think there are national rule books that are very different. There's no common definition of what's waste, what's a product. You can have a piece of PVC in one country, it's a product, and in the other it's waste. So there's no common definition. and the national rulebooks basically cause a lot of delays, high cost, and unpredictability for companies. So looking at this in 2016, the Netherlands and the UK took the initiative and were joined by Flanders and France to work on this. And the thinking behind this little group was, we have a lot of trade going in secondary resources going between us. And we don't want to wait for consensus between 28 member states. So let's just start and do something about this. So that's what we did. And the idea was, we're just gonna try. There's no guarantee for success. There's no legal binding agreement between us. There's just a common joint goal of let's try. So in early March 2016, a Green Deal, the North Sea Resources Roundabout, was signed in Brussels. There were 30 participants altogether. And these are stakeholders that have different roles related to this trade of secondary resources. So we had NGOs to make sure that we were critical to the environmental standards that we were achieving. We had branch organizations, companies, and national governments. And the national governments committed the active participation of policy experts and regulators, so competent authorities. And the idea was that we want to make optimal use of whatever possibility exists within the existing EU legislation. So let's put together our national rule books and see, can we take small steps towards harmonizing these rule books and make it easier. And the idea behind this Green Deal also was, we need to start small and make it very concrete, and then hopefully we can scale it up. So we worked on concrete streams going from one of the participating countries to another. We worked on compost going from the Netherlands to the UK. We worked on bottom ash going the other way from the UK to the Netherlands. PVC going from Flanders to Netherlands to the UK. Struvite going from Netherlands to France. And our last case, because we were joined in 2017 by Austria, dealt with e-waste. E-waste going between pre-consented facilities in the Netherlands to Austria, crossing Germany, which was a complicating factor, frankly. And there was a lot of interest, particularly in the e-waste case, which I think is just evidence for the importance of that particular waste stream. So all the participants joined in that particular working group. And the starting point for that one was, we have pre-consented facilities. It's a concept that's part of the waste shipment regulation, yet there is no practical benefits to being a pre-consented facility. So these companies that we were dealing with had streams that were tied up for months or years due to whatever reason. So the aim of that particular working group was to create a fast track. And also to work on financial guarantees, which tie up a lot of money and are a humongous administrative burden. So we worked on that. I think one of the things that we can mention, we did a test shipment after going through a whole process of putting these national rule books together, looking at the different conditions for becoming pre-consented facilities, for example. So very practical work. We did a test shipment which took a little under 3 weeks to get from the Netherlands to Austria. That was a big win.
Instead of months.
Compared to months or years,
Right.
it was a good first start.
Yeah.
We didn't get to finish. We didn't have enough time to really work further. But I think we learned a lot. Looking back at the beginning, where everybody was very much attached to their own national rule books. I think having that conversation between all these different stakeholders and just making it very practical, what's actually working and what isn't working, what do you think is a solution compared to ours? And can we harmonize? It's small steps and it takes time, but I think we actually made good progress.
Yeah, so I hear the learnings is really getting the countries to start talking to each other and be practical, right? Go from the abstract philosophy to really practical, what can be done. Are there any other key learnings you'd like to share that you think will be relevant for a global audience from that regional initiative?
Well, I think we were unlucky because the UK was such an important...
Not my fault.
No, it's such an important partner, and Brexit just derailed a lot of this this particular initiative. But I think when you look at it, what we were in essence asking, especially the competent authorities or the regulators, was to be creative and to take risks. And in order for them to be able to do that requires trust building and support in a shell around these working groups. And I think that's a tricky bit. And we, I think, need to realize that that takes a bit of time. And that every little step in that is valuable, even if you can't translate it in a day gain in time. It is necessary to be able to do this in this environment as it is at this moment.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. Be creative, trust each other, willing to take risk, and even small steps count. Thank you very much. So that concludes our session. I hope, dear audience, you all walk away being convinced that an efficient and responsible reverse supply chain matters. And I hope you walk away with some ideas how we can achieve that. And if you do have ideas on what specific actions can be done and who has the power to act upon these acupuncture points, please do come and talk to us. With that, I'd like to thank again all our speakers. I'd like to thank the planning team, Pratik from PACE, Caroline, Raleigh from the Circular Electronics Partnership, Rita from Citra, and thank you all.
Thank you.